All right, I think the poll is done. I'm just gonna save that. There we go. The poll's up, Bessie.
Maybe we have a quick look how we can viewing the poll result, particularly the question 5. It's very fascinating to gather everyone's idea about how it can show the power of women. And it seems every our attendees agree that the communication pattern, the way she speaks, can definitely show the power. That's the top one of all the options. And I think that's also very relevant to our guest speaker Sandy's topic today. And now I will hand it back to Pavit and Susie to start our conversation today.
Great. So, Susie, over to you. And I've just started the recording, so we can start our conversation. Your microphone's muted.
Unmute. So I was talking to myself, was I? Well, thank you everybody for coming. Thank you, Pavit and Bessie as well, for starting up the conversation. Like Pavit mentioned, we're recording this. Quite a few people have expressed interest in receiving this recording afterwards, so we thought it was appropriate to record it and send it to them. Now, I'm going to make this very casual. There's a few of us here, so we've got plenty of rooms to ask questions and engage with the speakers as well. But the first thing I want to do is sort of introduce each one of them, and then I'll ask some questions directly and we'll go from there. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Abiola Ajetomobi. Is that correct, Abiola? Abiola is from the refugee sector and community, a social innovator and director at the Asylum Seekers Resource Centre Innovation Hub. She oversees the design and delivery of programs and services that enable people seeking asylum to thrive. So welcome, Abiola, looking forward to having a conversation with you. Our second guest is Sandy McDonald. A few of you here, I can see, know Sandy, a long-term immigrant to Australia from Zimbabwe, mother of 2 and grandmother of 3. So I bet you're very busy, Sandy. Sandy says she puts her family at the forefront of her life and is deeply grateful for the opportunity to do so, afforded by living within the sanctity that Australia provides. Thank you and welcome, Sandy. And then I got a small bio here as well from Mary CHINDRIS. I hope I pronounced that one correctly again. I know people have trouble pronouncing my name. So Maria represents the not-for-profit social enterprise sector as the community relation lead at SistersWorks. She strives to develop a warm and meaningful relationship with the local and greater community for fundraising purposes and to raise awareness about the inspiring work of SistersWorks. Welcome, Maria, as well. So we have an amazing panel here today of speakers. So I'm going to jump right into it. Abiola, I just want to go to you first. Remember to unmute your microphone. Tell me a little bit about the Asylum Seekers Resource Centre, how it was established, and also what is it doing now? I know things have changed, so perhaps you can just go through that and your role there.
Thank you, Susanna. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. Asylum Seekers Resource Centre was founded in 2001, and that was founded by Konkara Panagiotides with the intention of supporting Vietnamese asylum seekers that came at that time. It was meant to be a 2-week project with the students that couldn't find a placement for social work courses, and eventually became an organization that it is today. And as an organization, we are multifaceted in our approach, and we provide day-to-day support for people seeking asylum, right from when they arrive surviving and thriving. So to give you an illustration of what that looks like in a very quick and sharp way, arriving in Australia, not knowing anyone, we have seen people come through our front door with their suitcases with taxi, just dropping them straight from the airport, right to people that have been in the community for a couple of days, couple of months or years, and now seeking safety due to some well-founded fear of prosecution. So that is the kind of cohorts that we work with, and we're coming from over 40 different nations of the world. And we see people needing support to survive through needing a roof over their head, needing legal assistance to apply for the refugee status, and also going through that visa determination process, right down to needing housing, needing to put a child in school, needing to navigate the Australian space, whatever that looks like in that entry, survival, finding their feet stage, right down to when they thrive. So I oversee the Innovation Hub, that way we support them to thrive. So these are people that already have a stability with accommodation, kids in school, and out looking what can they do and how can they contribute back to this beautiful country. So in the Innovation Hub, we support people through education, employment outcomes, as well as social enterprises or starting their own small business, whatever that looks like. But it's mainly just meeting people where they're at and providing services and support where they critically need it. In terms of what we're doing now, we've had to adapt significantly to this COVID space, particularly given the fact that people seeking asylum are not eligible for the government stimulus package, the federal government stimulus package. So the need has incredibly increased. We've seen people that we have supported to find work 3-4 years ago coming back to us, or have never even had to use our service and now needing our support. So the needs have increased greatly. So we've never shut our door through the COVID. So we've just been supporting people through accommodation, through feeding, now providing home delivery, groceries to mothers with little children during the homeschooling period, and also people that are highly vulnerable and are unable to come to the SRC due to circumstances or health-related issues. So we've been doing that. Also, our social enterprise have had to pivot significantly as well. Before, we used to only cater for events, and now we are having to actually provide meals, dinner, lunch, whatever people want, and special delicacy, culturally appropriate food. If you want to eat an Indian meal, you want to eat an African meal, because our members come from different parts of the world, and they had the chefs, they had the waiters, they had the expertise in terms of our menu creation, so they can actually prepare that food. So we've kind of found an edge for ourselves, some of that cultural appropriateness perspective, and also people that are looking to, so you might have a ticket to go to India, but unfortunately due to COVID, you can't go. We can provide the Indian food for you every night to make you feel good about not making that trip. So we've actually kind of created a new story and a new narrative around our catering. So we've moved from our catering working with over 70 people seeking asylum, right down to now about 9 or 10 due to cancellations in orders. Now we're picking that back up gradually as well. So that's good. So we moved from 0 orders to now about 5% of our, to 10% of our business coming back up due to that new initiative, which has just started in the last 2 weeks. So many things are happening in our organization. I think another important thing that I might mention here is that we've also partnered with the state government, with the Victorian state government, to provide employment for up to 120 people seeking asylum. So these are people that have lost work due to COVID and have not been able to regain any sense of livelihood and are at the risk of destitution and being homeless. So that's been made possible by the Victorian government. So we've got a lot of moving parts in terms of our organization, but that's something I can share now because of time. Thank you,
Abiola. I imagine that the Asylum Seekers Resource Centre will be extremely busy right now, and in particular with a lot of people now without work and possibly for a very long period as well. Now I'm going to pass to Sandy McDonald. Now, Sandy, tell us about why you started Sandy McDonald and your passion, I suppose. So if you can just give us an overview.
Sure. Well, my husband and I ran a marketing communications company for 22 years after arriving here in Australia. And one of the things that I look back on and reflect over that period of time was that one of the things we did with our clients was we would spend months digging really deeply to try and understand their purpose, which they really had, their people, for which they usually had scant interest, their product. Very often they had multiple ideas about their product. They weren't clear. And what they were positioning, you know, were they positioning themselves or their companies or their expertise. And then that would give us the ability to produce for them a brochure or a website or their corporate identity or whatever. And so when we finally decided to close the doors on that business for multiple reasons, which I'm not going to bore you all with right at the moment, what I came to understand was that the value was in that work, and that the brochure and the corporate identity or whatever it was we'd done was just the cherry on the top. So what did I do when we left our marketing communications company, in not the best situation you can possibly imagine, was I did whatever you should not do when you're in that kind of dire situation. I started a charity. And in actual fact, it was really by default rather than by design. My aunt had come over to visit, and I have actually told this story at some length in my TEDx talk, so I'm just going to give you a potted version because it's kind of important to the transition. And she'd mentioned in passing that she bought blankets to give out to kids that she found alone on the side of the road at night, and that was an appalling idea. And as I was playing around on the internet, at the time I was trying to work out how to make money, my mother had just made me a blanket knitted out of squares, and I had this aha moment. Oh, I'll go around, I'll play on the internet, and I'll see if I can get knitters to knit a square, send it to my aunt, and then she can make blankets rather than buy them. But, you know, all that curiosity, and that's a really important word that I'd like you to hold on to, that we had exhibited with our clients in the past, came to bear because I realized I couldn't ask knitters to do something if they didn't understand why. So I started to do a lot of research and discovered, you know, that there's this incredible tragedy of 25 million odd children who've been orphaned or abandoned because of HIV, AIDS and poverty. And so now I had a passion. I wasn't just about making money. I actually wanted to make a difference in the lives of these children. And so I started to tell the stories. I started to tell the stories about the kids, and I started to tell the stories about the knitters and my aunt and the volunteers in South Africa and the work that they were doing to make these blankets and distribute them. And it ignited a global passion. And, you know, we're now 11 years down the track. I have almost nothing to do with Knitters Square. It's run by the community of about 20,000 people in 71 countries. They've sent over 2 million squares, and my aunt and her volunteers have wrapped blankets around more than 100,000 kids. So it's an incredible story, really, about storytelling and what it can do. And obviously, at some point I woke up one day and thought, I just can't pretend that this charity is going to keep a roof over our heads. So I have to do something about it. And so I started a business course to see how I could pivot. And part of the business course involved writing a book. And in the book, I uncovered 3 principles for what I'd done. I unpacked what I'd done. And one was clarity, one was curiosity, and the third was coherence, because you have to be coherent about your messaging. You have to be constant. I love that word constancy because it implies reliability and truth and honesty and authenticity. And that's what coherent messaging is about. And what I really came to understand was that it was the stories that had done this work. So that led me to standing on the TEDx stage, and I told the story of Knitters Square. And at the very end of that story, of the talk, I told the story about a story that had been told to my daughter that had saved the life of our grandchild. And it was in telling that story that I came to believe and understand that stories genuinely have the power to enrich and transform and even save lives. So at the end of that talk, I'm literally pleading with people to tell their stories, you know, to say, you can tell your stories because they can change, transform, enrich, and even save lives. So it was a logical conclusion that the next 6 years would be spent developing a storytelling methodology that I could then help other people do this. And then very briefly at the beginning of this year, in a conversation with my good friend Sue Barrett, who is on this talk, she said, well, what stories could you tell to change people's opinions in the climate change debate? And we were looking at the fact that there was so much hopelessness in the fires, and that was pre-COVID. I mean, it was terrible. And I did some research, and you know, cognitively, if we're in a space of hopelessness, we cannot act. You have to be in a space of hope to act. So I developed a storytelling program in conjunction with Susanna called Changing Stories, which was all about moving people from shifting the dial, hope to hopelessness, ignorance to comprehension, and negativity to positive action. And so that's why I do what I do. I think that's probably going to be my life's work from now on.
Thank you, Sandy. And I did participate in that workshop as a co-host and learnt a few things myself, I have to say. So thank you. Now, Maria, to you now, tell us a little bit about SistersWorks, and even yourself, just share perhaps why you decided to work there and what drives you.
Sure. So hi everyone, and thank you Susanna for having me as a speaker for this event. My name's Maria and I'm the Community Relations Lead at SistersWorks. So I'm 21 years old, I'm quite young. My job at SistersWorks is my first job after having completed an undergraduate degree in International Studies at RMIT. And my degree at RMIT is what led me to my job at SistersWorks. I underwent my internship, which then led to a paid position, which I feel very grateful for. And I really couldn't ask for a better place to develop my professional skills, because SistersWorks works by a model of learning by doing, which is applied to how we train and support our sisters. And this is something that translates to our staff too. I'm just like continually presented with unique opportunities and a safe space to empower myself and flourish professionally. I'm a second generation migrant, so my parents moved here when they were in their early 20s from Romania. So that sort of migrant background is close to home for me. And I find my passion and my drive to support our women at SistersWorks through my own background, because I find it quite relatable. I see my mum, my grandma, or like the females in my family and the sisters that we support at SistersWorks. So SistersWorks is a non-for-profit social enterprise, and we're based in Melbourne. Through work and entrepreneurship, we have a mission to support women who are migrants, refugees and asylum seekers in improving confidence, mental wellbeing and their sense of belonging in Australia. Our vision is an Australia where all migrant women are given opportunities to become economically empowered. So SistersWorks saw its beginnings with our founder, Luz Restrepo. She migrated to Australia, well, she actually came as a political asylum seeker in 2010 from Colombia. When she arrived in Australia, her life was completely flipped upside down. She spoke no English, she was isolated and felt quite disempowered, having come from a professional background in her home country of Colombia. But she was really quick to discover that she wasn't alone in these challenges that she was facing. So in 2011, with a group of 25 other women, they started making craft together, craft products, and selling it in local markets in Melbourne. And that's how the idea of SistersWorks was born. So to me, SistersWorks is the epitome of women power. We're grounded in the belief that work empowers women. So we provide our sisters with work opportunities through weekly training and production workshops. Our sisters make a variety of products from homeware, craft, body care, even food products. And these are sold in a retail store, which is in Richmond. And also we have an online platform through our website. At least 50% of the profit from these sales goes directly to the woman that has made the product, and then the rest is reinvested into SistersWorks, so we can continue to provide our sisters with social and economic empowerment. These financial incentives and social support build a building block. They're like a building block and a foundation for our sisters to achieve better things and find their feet, to pursue sort of like employment pathways. To date, we've supported over 492 women from 56 different countries. So we are champions of diversity. And we have aspirations to expand our model to a national level, because at the moment we are just based in Melbourne, but we've started sharing our model with other Victorian regions, and we have new partners in Dandenong and Bendigo. And yeah, we only hope to expand more and to reach more women to go to them rather than depending on them to come to us. Yeah.
Thank you, Maria. I actually visited the Richmond shop or workshop. You know, you got offices, workshops, and a shop there. Just when you moved in. So, and I love this model of, you know, it's a very entrepreneurial model where you get the women sort of, you know, revenue sharing basically with, you know, whatever they produce. So it's fantastic. It teaches them a lot of new skills. So yeah, well done. Now I'm going to go straight into some questions, and I want to ask Abiola, if it's okay, Abiola. In recognition of the COVID impact, you know, the job losses, people pulling money out of super, the homeschooling that, you know, people have to manage. We're interested to know how you're coping as a woman and a mother, and what does financial viability means to you?
So I think I'm coping a lot better now, but at the event, when COVID actually started, I faced a lot of anxiety due to lack of control, lack of sense of understanding of what exactly I should be doing. Felt a big weight of me not only caring for myself, but caring for my family and ensuring the safety of my children. So that was really a big, it was a very daunting time for a lot of people, including myself, not just knowing what would happen next and just listening to the news every hour and getting a lot of scary statistics and also information that are continually dividing us. Stay away from each other, don't shake your neighbor, you know, don't hug anyone. So, and for someone like myself, that's been part of my life, to build relationships, build connections, you know, be part of society and be relevant and have influence. It was just really scary and daunting to be finding myself to be restricted. I felt very restricted. I know a lot of people feel the same. So I hope some people can relate to what I'm saying. So it was really a very daunting time. But I think as a mother, one of the things that made it incredibly challenging, because I'm fortunate to be one of the people that still have a job today. A lot of women have, you know, lost work and now having to find their feet. Some people having to rediscover themselves and try new career, make a totally 360-degree turn in terms of what they want to be doing or what they have been doing, which if you ask most people in January, they probably don't have that plan at all. So that's quick adaptability and responsiveness has happened to a lot of people. Even for us that still have a job, we've had to do some of that inventing and rediscovery as well. So I think, and that was really something that was very prevalent in my thoughts, in my mind. If I lose my work, what would I do? So there was a lot of lack of control and sense of understanding what was happening. So that anxiety level was so high. I think since then, we've been able to get a much more balanced view of what the world looks like now. We don't know what it's going to look like in a month's time, but I feel that in the midst of it all, financial viability is incredibly important. It's important because as a mother, we are emotional beings, we are maternal, so not only thinking about ourselves, we think about others. Even though the world is telling us now you have to be selfish, now you have to keep your money to yourself, Now you have to buy your own toilet paper and keep it under your bench and make sure you have enough for the next day and all of that. I think mothers, it's so hard for us to think that way. But I don't believe we're wired to be selfish. So in that space, it's just about what can I control? How can I support my family? How can I support myself? My husband lost his work during COVID as well. So there were so many things happening in my family, but I think above it all was more around my family overseas. I'm one of 25 children. And even though I was fortunate to have my mom here with me in Australia during COVID, I still have my siblings, their children, all in countries where I know they don't have the resources or care if they have an outbreak. So all those kind of increased my level of anxiety. So I was just all over the place. And also having to come to work every time and having to carry that brave face and support other people and know that I'm still in a privileged position than so many people, and I need to kind of get on with it, is something I need to keep reminding myself. I'm a glass half full person. I have a very positive outlook in life, but I tell you, I think I've said in one of my other podcasts as well, it really challenged me. I've been through so much in my life, but COVID really stretched my resilience and my ability to really keep everything together, particularly my thought process, which I always protect and ensure that it's intact. So I feel that financial viability for someone like myself was just around just having enough, and also thinking, what can I do for others? For myself, like many migrants, we care for our families in third world countries. So even though I think I have enough in my pantry, every fortnight I will have to think about the financial contribution and obligation I have to my family overseas on a fortnight basis. And being able to do that, and knowing that if I make a decision to stop that one way or the other, it actually has a very big and drastic effect on their livelihood. Which if I'm fortunate to be in a country like this where I can go to agencies and get support and have Centrelink and all of that. And I think we saw that a lot in people seeking asylum as well, in terms of the challenges they had to go through in COVID, particularly for all those that are not eligible for the government stimulus and having to feel exposed and feel a great sense of injustice around how they've been treated. So there's a lot of mixed emotions there. But I believe financial viability is mainly just making sure I can keep on top of the minimal thing and having that sense of gratitude and contentment. I think in terms of super and all of that, I feel that if it's needed, if it's a last result, people have to use that and use that as a way of supporting themselves and supporting their family and making sure that they can keep a roof over their head. But for those of us that have a job, I think it's actually now more than ever for us to start thinking about how to support other people, because there's a lot of people that have been adversely affected financially and socially due to COVID in our society.
Thank you for sharing that very personal account of, it's very honest of how, and I think that's also how we're all feeling. Everyone's got a family that's lost jobs, or that income is not coming in anymore. Businesses have dried up, and I think it will make us, if we stick all together as a society now, will make us stronger. But thank you for sharing that very personal account. Does anyone else want to add to this? I'm just going to, Sandy or Maria, did you want to add anything in regards to this?
I think Abiola captured how many of us are feeling absolutely perfectly.
Yeah. All right. So I just want to ask now, Maria, can you tell us what steps SistersWorks takes to sustain a small business during COVID? I mean, we know what you do is, the women make a lot of products and then you have to sell it. Some of these are non-essential products. And how do you sustain that? How do you make sure they continue to generate an income through the sales of this product?
Yeah, that has been a challenge for us. Yeah, we're a non-for-profit, we support our sisters, but we do that through the functioning of our retail store and our business. So yeah, that's where a significant amount of our profit comes from our sales in our retail store. An important aspect of this is the fact that our women make these products, and these workshops are what sustains and supports our sisters. So suspending this production was not an option for us, because these production workshops provide a financial incentive for our women, as well as like a social connection through being able to connect with people. So they're not, it reduces isolation, so they're not on their own. So SistersWorks was extremely proactive and immediate. We developed a remote learning model for our sisters. So we translated our daily production workshops into a virtual sphere through video classes. And we had all the materials that the sisters would need to still produce sent to our women's homes through Australia Post, or even sometimes it was personal delivery from our staff members that would drive to our women's homes, just so they would have access to the materials, and sewing machines too. We were loaning sewing machines to women, and essentially all our sisters had to do was just tune into the online class via video call. And yeah, so it's one thing for our sisters to still be producing, but to get our customers to continue buying products was something that was really intimidating for us. But our production team was very creative. They almost immediately developed a design for a reusable face mask. So we have a line that's been quite successful throughout these past few months of isolation of reusable face masks. They're made from donated cotton fabrics that we receive from our community, and they have like an inline of muslin fabric, which helps with breathability and an extra layer of hygiene, and you can place a filter in between them. It was a very creative design that our production team came up with. So this has become one of our main projects that has been able to sustain sales, and also a project for our sisters to work on from home. And we've had pretty outstanding support from our community in buying these masks, from a pre-existing audience, as well as new people that have come across SistersWorks from finding these face masks. And we've had a beautiful, like one of our nicest stories that has come out of this is with one of our sisters who's called Logini. She was loaning one of our sewing machines to make the masks, and within a few weeks she actually ended up earning enough money to then buy her very own sewing machine. And this to me is quite a beautiful representation of the SistersWorks model, because Logini was able to economically empower herself through participating in our workshops. And we've also had a bit of attention from media for our reusable face masks. We were lucky enough to be featured in a broadsheet media article called 6 Australian Face Masks You Can Buy Online. So yeah, we've been lucky with our mask project. That's been quite a pillar for us throughout this time. And yeah, I think overall just strengthening our online presence has been our key tool to sustaining ourselves as a business.
Thank you. It's amazing the innovation that comes out of a lot of businesses not able to operate, and where they are suddenly making something else. And yeah, but you need some some people with ideas and foresight to be able to do that. So well done for that. I'm going to look up at that article.
Yeah, I can send the link out.
That would have been really good for a bit of media coverage anyway.
Yeah.
So Seni, I'm going to go into a question around storytelling, in particular this time. Why do you consider story to be so important in communication? You're muted.
Sorry. It was really fascinating that the response to what would empower women was 100% was communication. That was pretty validating for me, because I believe that story is probably the most powerful component of compelling communication, and that communication itself matters a great deal, because really the quality of our relationships is determined by the quality of our communication. So in terms of how stories play out in the role that stories have in communication, I tell a story about Dr. Karl Kruszelnicki in my training. So forgive me, Charlotte, because I think you've heard this story, but I was driving into the countryside not long ago, listening to a podcast by him about climate change. And Dr. Karl is actually a really good storyteller, very simple, but he tells great stories. And also he was voted the 9th most trusted human being in Australia in 2014. And actually, when you put those two things together, trustworthy and good storyteller, it does make for compelling communication. And so in answer to a question by a really worried listener from the UK, if this climate change stuff is real, what are we going to do about it? He responded with 2 stories, but it was the first story that really intrigued me. So the first story was about a man called Dr. James Black, who 31 years ago co-authored a report for Exxon, a petrochemical company that he was working for at the time, that said if we continued to burn fossil fuels at the rate that we were, climate temperatures would rise by 2%. And he then went on to say that Exxon had employed an army of scientists since then to examine this issue. And then last year, a group of researchers at Harvard University had got hold of these public record documents and done an analysis of them. And they came up with a report that said they believed that the stories the scientists had been telling Exxon were markedly different to the stories that Exxon had been telling the public. Now, I mentioned the word curiosity before, so I was curious enough to go and do some research of my own. And I discovered that these documents are on public record. You can find hundreds of them. But I also discovered an organization called Energy and Depth that vigorously disputed the findings of the researchers at Harvard University. And it turns out that they are the independent voice of the Petroleum Association of America. Now, I found this really disheartening because I am a person that believes that we are responsible for climate change and that it is our behaviors that have overloaded the atmosphere with carbon dioxide. But actually what I really found fascinating was this is a case study for how powerful story is when it is used to support invested interest. And it really doesn't matter what side you're on. Mm. Now, we know that story has always been used to distort and derail and deflect, because you only have to look at the world's worst dictators to know that. But women in particular can use story for a very different energy. They can use stories for clarity and vision and collaboration. And because I believe that when we tell stories from clarity of purpose and principles, it channels the curiosity that fuels the energy to do good in the world. And I think my Knit a Square story is such a perfect validation of that. I'm really invested in helping women in particular tell their stories to do better in the world, to lead better, to be better, all the betters. And that fulfills my purpose, which is to help people tell their stories to enrich and transform and save lives. Because if I'm helping all of you to tell your stories to do that, then I'm fulfilling my purpose. And there is a huge amount of science around why stories work as powerful communication. And I'm not going to go into this right now, but there is just a big body of science that explains how stories work neurochemically in our brains. And I suppose the question that I would ask is, we tell stories to our children, and we can see that stories make them feel safe and envelop them, and then stories embrace them and they feel like they belong. And we can see that they're learning from stories. So then we get to be adults, and for some reason, we think that we can't tell stories anymore. So I speak often to people who say, oh no, our stories are important. It's like purpose. Oh, they say purpose is important, but when you ask them to articulate it, they don't always do it. But they say stories are important, and I know I should be telling stories, but I don't know how to. And I think if you don't have the framework from which you can tell your stories, then your lizard brain will get in the way and you just won't do it. And that's such a pity, because stories are so powerful and we all should be telling them, especially women.
Oh, thank you, Sandy. I think, I think almost a lot of people lose the ability to tell a story. You know, we think it's something that we do with the children and not as adults. I find that myself sometimes really hard. You want to say something and you worry about how is it going to really be expressed, and so you stop telling stories. Now I'm going to jump into a very different question back to Abiola, just a bit more to understand a bit more. So in your role at the Asylum Seekers Resource Centre, you manage large state government project and initiative. What would you say have been the skills and ability we need to thrive in a post-COVID-19 world?
Thank you. Thank you, Susanna. I've been really enjoying this session because there's a lot to learn. I keep writing things down. I don't want to forget. It's really great. But I feel that what the skills and ability we need to thrive, I will focus on women, because that's how my thought process works. I remember I'm a woman before I remember I'm even from Africa. You know, my female identity is more stronger in my head. So I think 4 things for me in terms of things that we need as women to thrive post-COVID-19. One of it is around relevance, ensuring that even regardless of the circumstances that we've been through this COVID, we ensure that we remain relevant. Relevant in our professional life, our societal life. So whether it's rediscovering ourselves, maintaining our levels of professionalism, upskilling, realigning ourselves, whatever that looks like, that we ensure that we are relevant. So relevant as a woman, when someone wants to talk about something, they think of me. They need advice on something, they think of me. So I actually have, beyond a specialty, I would call it, it's a presence, it's a being. That's how I see relevance. Another one is recognition, that even in the relevance that it's worthy of recognition. And I feel so, as a woman from Africa and as well living in a Western culture, I feel that we have to work 200 times or more to prove our relevance, to prove our competence and our skills and all the things that we bring. So being recognized for it is actually a good thing. So it actually reaffirms ourselves as a woman, and also reaffirms our sense of identity and recognition. And also in a country or society or world where we are talking about wage parity and gender equality, I think relevance and recognition is one of the things that will put women out there. And that recognition and relevance and recognition particularly needs to come from women to women before it goes any other way. So as women recognizing each other and affirming each other. I've read quite a few posts in LinkedIn where someone has posted a link or whatever. I don't really watch it, but I just like it, just to kind of recognize them and appreciate what they're doing, and appreciate that they're putting themselves out there. So that's what I'm talking about, that those kind of intangible tangibles. We don't have to put an award or an event there where we give everyone a placard. I'm talking about making sure that people that are in our circle, in our network, knows that we see them, we know them, and we recognize their work. And also another one is around authenticity. And I think comes to all the things you're talking about, Sandy, in terms of storytelling and communication and how we speak as women, which I think I found really interesting in the polling as well, is about being authentic, being real. I think my story is my story. You like it, you don't like it, see you later. I can't change who I am to please anyone. So being authentic, being real, you always find your own niche, you always find your own people, you always find people that will believe in you. One of my friends was talking to me last week and she was saying, I kind of feel like I need an advocate. I need someone that can hold my hand and say, you know what, I trust this person, she can do the job, give her the role. And sometimes we need that, but it has to come from women to women before other parts of the world can see it. And I think authenticity is one of the ways that will pave us through in spaces where it matters, you know, in rooms where it matters. I was watching something on Instagram yesterday around a little clip around on Blacklead channel, and one of the things that Queen Latifah was saying in the movie was around being in the room. It's not about you winning or losing, but make sure you are on that seat. Make sure you're sitting there, make sure you're being in the room. And part of being in the room is being authentic, is making sure that people can rely on what we say and they can know us and see us for who we are and be able to believe in our story and believe in our truths. There's a lot of frameworks, like Sandy said, about storytelling. There's a lot of technology around it and science behind it, but I feel that honesty and transparency is actually one of the best key to storytelling and ensuring that we remain relevant, recognized, and also making sure that we are having the level of influence that we need in society. And the fourth one, obviously I've mentioned, which is around influence. Ensuring that we are influencing each other, we're influencing our world, we're influencing our community. Women are an emotional breed. And I feel that naturally, because of our level of emotion and things, actually bring some level of influence with it. Because people can tell, when you're upset, they can tell when you are sad, and they can tell, how you feel and all of that. We can always hide it. We're not so good at doing that because we just are very raw and very emotionally present. But I think once we are thinking about, in this presence, in this being, in terms of influence and having that recognition, also thinking about as well, what influence am I making? Is it negative? Is it positive? What energy am I bringing to a space? And what am I hoping to get out of it as well? And I feel that for someone like myself, I always tell my circle of friends, I feel very grateful to be in a country like this. I walk on the street of Melbourne and I feel like I'm walking on gold. And that is because I know that this opportunity could be given to another 1 million women in Africa and they would do well. It's all about opportunity and giving space and giving the space and the voice to be able to contribute back to society. So that's actually how I say it.
Thank you. Thank you. And, you did not mention one technical skill, which is really important, what in terms of, what we're talking about here is all the skills that we need as a society to be able to support each other. So thank you for sharing that. That's amazing. I'm going to jump back to Sandy here. I think that's an important question now. What role could stories play in the power of women? What's your thought on that?
Well, I thought that in the sort of slightly limited time that we had tonight, I might just showcase how stories are being used by women and used successfully, and also showcase some stories or some women, some people who have the ability to tell stories and know they should be telling stories, but aren't yet. And I've spoken to some people and said, can I share this with the audience? And they've said, yes, absolutely. So first up, I'd really like to demonstrate what I call a curated story, because I think a lot of people feel, or a lot of women in particular feel like it's got to be personal. And there's no doubt about it that personal stories pack a very powerful punch, because they do. They come from the heart. They often have deep insight from the person's lived experience. And I think personal story has a huge role to play in this world of enriching and transforming and even saving lives. But curated story has a role to play too. And I think for the people that the women who might be struggling with the idea of, I don't have any personal stories, believe me, you do. You're all sitting on thousands of stories. You just have to work out how to mine them like gold. The curated story is a really good way of starting the process of telling stories. And, curated stories can be retelling a story that you've heard. It's a bit like being a reporter, but it still has to filter through your purpose. It's still, you're telling it for a specific purpose. It's coming through your purpose. So a story I would like to curate tonight and share is on behalf of my friend Sue Barrett, who told me this story the other day, and it sent goosebumps up and down my arms. And actually, Maria, your story about pivoting to masks is a very similar story. And it was about a man called Jeremy Fleming, I think. And Sue told this story that she'd actually interviewed Jeremy, and this video is on her website, so I feel like you should all go and watch it afterwards, and I'm just going to give you a potted version. about the fact that on the 13th of March, Jeremy runs a company called Stage King. And on the 13th of March, they were putting the finishing touches to a big stage set for the Grand Prix for Miley Cyrus. That's what they do. They build these massive, great big stage sets. When they heard on the radio the Prime Minister saying that no more groups of more than 500. So they knew instantly that that was the end of that event, and that in fact, every event that they had booked out into the foreseeable future would disappear. And so they felt like their business had gone down the tubes, and by the Friday, they were thinking of letting go their people. And then the founder spoke to somebody in Ireland who was a friend, and he said, have you thought about desks? Because there were no desks in IKEA, no desks in Officeworks, because everyone had gone home. And so they designed desks, and they put them up on social media, and by the following day, they had an e-commerce business happening, and 6 weeks later, 4,000 orders. Now, Sue listened to the story, and at the end she said, so you looked at your resources and your talents and you played to your strengths. And indeed, that's exactly what they'd done, just exactly what your people had done too, Maria. And she then went on to say, well, that's what we do. You know, we ask our people to stop and think and look at their resources and work out how they can use those resources in that capacity and play to their strengths to get through COVID. Now that to me was just a beautiful way of realizing this story in terms of Sue's business. Without in any way, there's nothing manipulative about that. That's about serving. That's about saying, you too can do this. And so I thought that was a wonderful demonstration of how you can use story in your own business to serve. And then the second story was a woman called Carolyn, and I need to get her what she is upright. So Carolyn Kennedy, she's an award-winning global executive coach, and she'd written an article about leadership training in LinkedIn. And in it, she had, now these are all of these people, you know, I read their articles, they're all incredibly eloquent, they're clearly experts in their field. These are considered articles of great worth. And at the bottom, she'd said, made a comment that often when leaders return with knowledge of their new skills, they find it challenging to break norms and practice their recently developed behaviors. Now, in and of itself, I thought that was a really important insight because it gave you a clear idea of how leadership training can fail. And obviously, if it's failing, it's to a massive cost to the organization, and more importantly, to those people that should be being led better by the people who are being trained to lead better. So I asked Carolyn if she had a story that would exemplify that I could share tonight. And she came back and said, yes, she did. Mary, her client, had explained to her that she was deeply frustrated because she'd said that her sales leader, her new sales leader, Peter, had come back from an intense piece of training around improved coaching and communication. But that in the next sales meeting that they had, he'd gone right back to using control language again. You're not forecasting right. You need to include your conversion pipeline. Mm. And I got it instantly. It was like this line that she'd said, which I understood in my head. Now I got it in my heart, because I know what it's like to be spoken to that way. In fact, we all know what it's like to be spoken to that way. And you can imagine that so one of the things that came out of that immediately for me was that it illustrated perfectly what bad communication does, because that's the language of coercion and exclusion, and it's dismissive language. And story doesn't do that. Story can't do any of those things. Good stories don't, if they're told in context, they don't coerce, they persuade. They never exclude, because if the focus is that person, then you're including them. And the fact of the matter is that story holds the space for a much deeper conversation. So Just like Sue could have a deeper conversation with any client that she was talking to about looking at their strengths based on that story. Carolyn could have a deeper conversation with anybody that she was talking to about leadership by telling that story, because it would resonate with them at an emotional level. And that's the power of story. In the hands of women, story is like a piece of clay. You know, you can sculpt it to build emotional resonance and connection. I think it's in our DNA, but we've just forgotten how to do it. And I have one last quick story. And I've included a man because they're 50% of the population. And if we want this world to be a better world post-COVID, we have to get men to do the work that we want to do. They have to also lead better, be better, rise to the challenge. And I think a lot of men are very keen to do this, but don't necessarily have the tools. So it's up to us to work with men to help them do that. So this is from a chap called Jeff McDonald, who's also in the leadership space. He'd written a post about the decentralization of leadership. And his last line was a question. Do you give your people enough space to lead themselves? So I rang him and I said, Jeff, do you have a story for me? So he cogitated for a while and then he said, well, think about nature. He said, think about the way fish swim and birds flock and termites build a nest. He said, there's no one ant leader saying to all the other ants, put your grain of sand there. They have a set of rules and they're just building the nest in flow. It's just what they're doing. Now, I just told him a story about going to my granddaughter's school because they were starting prep the next day. And this was like a orientation day. This is recently post-COVID. And how I had observed the parents and the teachers in this kind of almost like a choreographed dance as we all observed the 1.5 meter rule. And we were all sort of moving around each other. It was like we'd practiced it. It was like we knew it. And he said, you see, there it is at play. He said, the government said, we've looked at the data and from around the world, and we know what you have to do to keep safe. You have to keep 1.5 meters apart. And he said, we just do it. We lead ourselves through the process. And I'd seen that. And he brought this together as a wonderful little story. And as a result, I completely understood what he meant when he said, give your people the space to lead themselves. And that's the profound impact that story can have. It doesn't have to be epic. It can just be like that. So that's why I feel like women have a very powerful role. Stories have a very powerful role in the work that we can do on behalf of both women and men to get this world to be a better place.
Thank you. And you sort of covered 3 stories, Sandy.
That's
fantastic.
Called Narrative Breathe.
Also, we've shared the link of that, what's his name, Jeremy Fleming. Sue shared the link. So have a look at that when you've got some time. That's really good. Maria, I just want to jump to you now. Just during this time, just during COVID, what have been the challenges and the opportunity in supporting our sisters, SistersWorks? But also, you have to bring a lot of things online. How has that affected interactions and connections with people? Have you seen, is it change, or is it brought people closer, or is it people have, accepted it, or are you seeing people struggling with this new way of doing things?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a big challenge for us being a social organisation, and just with the structure of our workshops, of them being face-to-face and practical learning with our sisters, just having to transfer to an online sphere was very challenging. Just with little things like our women having access to the technology to participate in the online workshops, that was something that we had to deal with initially. Just having digital communication apps on their telephones, their mobile phones, that's not something that all of our women had. So there was a process of transition there of teaching our sisters how to download these apps. When English is your second language, there's certain barriers that are there, and that process is lengthened. So yeah, we had this transition period that was a little bit difficult, but ultimately we saw opportunity in making these workshops accessible online. SistersWorks is lucky to be involved in a UN Women program called Second Chance Education, and that's supported by the BHP Foundation, and essentially the aim is to help women of Indigenous, refugee, low-income backgrounds develop meaningful learning and employment pathways. And yeah, this is an international program. It's being piloted in Cameroon, Jordan, India, Mexico, and Australia is included. And SistersWorks is lucky enough to participate in the Australian program in the practical educational opportunities that we give to our sisters. And we have a goal to expand our reach of SistersWorks to 2,000 sisters by 2021. And an integral part of that is developing an online platform so that we can reach the sisters rather than depending on them to come to us. So this is an opportunity that we saw in what has presented itself in a time of isolation. This partnership with UN Women was like years in the making. We partnered with them last year, and little did we know that we'd find ourselves in this climate in 2020 where the globe is like on a global sphere, we're working on a virtual level. So there's been a silver lining there. We've really been able to accelerate the development of our eHub, and now we have these tools and resources that we can sort of transfer to reaching sisters, like isolation or not, just women that are further away from our Richmond hub. And yeah, in terms of sort of maintaining an authenticity through virtual communication, a key to that, which I sort of resonated with what Abiola was mentioning in terms of honesty and transparency in communication. We've really tried to own in on that and just be transparent with our audience. And we've really been relying a lot on social media to communicate with our audience during this time. We've been developing our social media campaigns, and we're posting daily just updates of what we're doing, current projects and achievements. And our SistersWorks community is very positive and driven. So we're just trying to transfer that positivity onto an online sphere through our social media posts. And there isn't technicality involved there. It's just like taking pictures on our phones and sharing our daily activities. But I think that's something that resonates with the community in the authenticity of the posts. It's something that they can relate to, and they feel a part of the SistersWorks family and our SistersWorks activities. And I'm enjoying hearing the common themes with Sandy and Abiola of how like women are emotional. They're emotional people. When at SistersWorks, we're not afraid to be emotional and personal, and we transfer that into our virtual communications with our audience. We share personal stories from our sisters, our volunteers, our staff members, and that's something that we find strength in our SistersWorks family through connecting socially and having heart-to-heart conversations with people. And yeah, I think that the power of women is reflected in this. Typically in our SistersWorks workplace, prior to physical distancing, our days are filled with hugs and kisses, and we eat lunch together, we share stories, and that strong emotional connection is somewhat associated with like a feminine form of connection, something that females are more prone to. But it has created a strong bond in our SistersWorks family. And yeah, we wear our hearts on our sleeve, and that's something that we've just been trying to transfer through our virtual communications with our community.
Thank you. From what I can see, there's been a lot of innovation coming out of all of this. You know, whether you're teaching your group of women to go online and learn a new tool, or doing something else through the masks. So I think all around, even though COVID is not really something we want to ever experience. It's given the opportunity to a lot of people to think differently. If we can get a positive out of that, I think that's the one. Now, what I want to do, I want to put some questions forward that some of the people have sent through first. So I've got one here for you, Maria, from Catalina. She wants to know if it was hard to get the women connected into an online workshop.
Yeah.
To convince them that it was okay to do that, you know.
Yeah. I think the women were, in terms of being convinced, they were more than motivated to continue to participate in the workshops. They wanted to stay connected with us. It's one of the biggest benefits of SistersWorks. That is actually, we conducted a social return on investment report, and we had research done into the social impact of SistersWorks, and one of our biggest achievements is the improved mental health and social relationships of our women. Just being able to go to SistersWorks and have a woman there that's going through the same thing as them. So they really love coming in and participating in our workshops at the Empowerment Hub. So our women were more than willing to adapt to the online workshops, but I think, the challenges presented themselves with just access to technology and access to apps. That's something that I think is overlooked. It's a typical day-to-day activity for a lot of us, but when English is your second language, or even being in an elderly pocket of the community, it's just not as prevalent. And it just sort of took a while with that transition. We sort of broke down the process of downloading an app and how to use online video calls. And our women are adaptable. They were able to learn those new skills to ultimately participate. And things like having an access to a laptop at home, little things like that. Some cases where we'd have to loan laptops, or they just have to borrow that off family and friends.
Thank you. I've got a question here for Abiola. Given your experience leading an organisation and teams in your journey, have you come across instances where your voice was not heard or ignored because you are a woman? If so, how did you overcome such a situation? And what will be your advice for women, and even more so women who are migrants?
Thank you. That's a very interesting question. I got asked this question by a student at Melbourne College, year 11 student, who asked me a similar question. And to be honest with you, my response was that sometimes I'm not sure. Like, you walk into a room and you really can't, something, it's not right, but you can't pinpoint it. Sometimes I don't know whether it's sexism or racism, or just not wanting me to be in the room, or just not feeling accepted, or you can't tell what it is, but you can feel that there's something strange in the environment. But one of the good things that does as well is it helps you to remove that pressure you've put on yourself, because you can see that people have already made a conclusion or judgment. So it actually makes me to feel more free. So I don't need to impress anyone or prove myself anymore. You've already got your judgment. So it actually comes as a strength sometimes to myself. So that's how I see it. But I think one of the advice I can give, so there's been times where I felt kind of small in a room or invisible. And I think most of the time, also particularly in leadership as well, because I'm a very passionate person, it can come across as being hostile. And people don't want to offend you, and you start to feel precious, which is actually taking things out of context or out of the topic, and all those kind of different behaviors or perceptions occur. But what I always do to overcome it is to make sure that I'm living in my truth. So when I speak with intentionality. I'm assertive as possible. I'm objective as possible. I'm very conscious of my tone, that is balanced and all of that. So I kind of put a little more work in making sure that I have something tangible to contribute to a room as well. But I think in terms of advice I can give to other migrant women is just to find their own voice and do all they can to amplify it. Because I think that's one of the things that I've been able to do for myself is to amplify my own voice. People don't care what you have to say, regardless of your color, background, race. It's just society. Yeah, it's just a normal part of society. So we shouldn't be taking offense by things like that, but look at how to amplify your own voices. And one of the things I do to amplify my voice is I take on opportunities such as today. Even though it might not be convenient, the time might not work, I try to make sure that I'm there because that's how I amplify my voice. That's how I speak my own truth and speak my own reality and make sure that I'm heard, you know, in platforms where I'm welcome. So I try to seize those opportunities. And also another thing I always do, if I'm in leadership meeting or leadership setting, is to make sure that in the midst of the conversation, I really don't have to speak unless I have something to say. I think there's a strength in being silent as well. So I kind of just use that. Sometimes my boss is very conscious. I call him a feminist, so he's very conscious of that. When he sees you quiet, he'll probably say, do you have anything to say? Do you have anything to contribute? And I always say, oh, I'm actually observing and listening, and I like that. You know, I don't have to feel like I have to say something to make people feel like I'm in the room. Just the presence alone, it's comfort, and having the opportunity to actually be on the table, it's beyond where I think I would be at this time of my life or my situation based on my background and the crises and the situations I've been through in my life. So just that sense of gratitude to even be in the room. If I don't contribute today, then that's fine. Next week I might have something to say.
Great advice. Thank you for that. We've got a comment and a question from Sue here. Emotions are human, and this is for the panel in general, whoever wants to answer. Emotions are humans, not just a domain of women. I see myself as a human first, and as someone who is also very analytical as well as very empathetic. I know that we have to enable women to be more business savvy and commercial, literally, not just emotional. What thoughts do the panel have about this? Does anyone want to make a comment on that?
I think, Sue, I think you're absolutely on the money there, because I think women tend to be vocational rather than commercial. Well, not all women, but a lot, especially if they're passionate about something, and especially if they're actually working in the space of making a difference in people's lives. There is that sort of vocational approach, and that the tendency is to think that they should be doing that stuff, and that the moment that they ask for money, that somehow the purity of what they're doing is defiled. And I really think that's got to be unraveled. And I mean, to some extent, I'm speaking from my own experience, although I have been in business for 43 years, so I've somehow managed to overcome that. But I feel like that is a real problem for women, not just in their own businesses, but in professional work, asking for what they're worth and the right exchange of value. And I feel very strongly that we need help to do that.
Mm-hmm. Does anyone, Maria or Abiola, do you want to add to that? Or so Sue, you wanted to say a few more. Do you want to elaborate on that? Yes, we can open it up, definitely.
Okay. I just think when I listen to all of these discussions around women, one of the things that we have to be able to do is provide them with the tools and resources that the men have had hold of for a long time. Mm-hmm. And we've also got to know how to talk with men. We've got to find ways to find common ground so that we actually can have really good conversations with each other and actually work on productive ways. I mean, I'm not a binary person like that. I don't like saying things are, a binary, one way, this way. We're all human. So I would really love to see more commercial literacy for women. They need to know how to speak the language of business if they're actually going to be in positions of power in business. And we're here talking about women in power. And I think it's really important that we actually don't turn into the types of power that may have been holding us hostage for the last 40 years that have created, a lot of challenges, because I think we can have a much better, more human-centered approach to business. But we do have to know how to talk business, and not just be people that make things, but actually lead people and are stewards of systems and actually drive opportunity. And I think that when you have that language, you can walk amongst anyone pretty much and actually work with them. So I don't want to exclude anyone. I'm very much about inclusion, but I'm also about making sure that people are literate and savvy and actually know how to speak the language of business. And that is missing a lot from what I hear in a lot of these really beautiful environments. And they get really funny and a bit anxious when you start talking like this. And they go, oh, that's not me. I go, well, I'm sorry, but if you actually want to have power, you have to actually also embrace this as well. So I'm all about inclusion and not exclusion. But that means that we can't point fingers at other people or other things or systems. And that's why I do the work I do, because a lot of people say, oh, but Sue, you'd be much better if you did. No, I'm walking in there because that's where the change needs to be. I walk in corporate, I walk in business, I work in those areas because that's where we have to change from the inside out if we want a better world. Anyway, I'll shut up now.
Thank you. Thank you. Sue?
Can I add to that, Susanna?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I really appreciate what you said. And before, Susanna, when you were pointing out, I didn't mention any technical skills. You were very right. I was intentional about that, because I feel that sometimes as women, we feel that the more technical skills we have, the more we are going to be relevant, the more we're going to be recognized, the more our voices will be heard. But sometimes also it put a lot of pressure on us. And I think that without those technical skills, we won't be employed to be doing what we're doing. For those that are employed, or starting a business or even having an initiative, those technical skills are actually what drives you or what gives you the validation to do what you do anyway. So that's something that you have in your portfolio. I just wanted to add to what Sue was saying in terms of business acumen and how we develop ourselves and become literate in that, so that we can speak the language of business and be able to kind of equally participate in those kind of level of forum where they think women are weak, or women don't have much of the understanding or the knowledge, or even sometimes the tactics of business. So I think one of the things that have helped myself personally is I've embraced a lot of opportunities that mostly come free. So not all of them do I get access to, but when I see there's a course on leadership, there's a course on for purpose, there's a course on this and that, I always put myself forward, because I know that I would develop those skills that will ensure that my leadership is balanced. It's not only around my ability to lead people, but also be able to lead a business and do it successfully. So that's one of the ways that I've been able to improve myself, and I still continue to sought after. I remember I saw a for purpose executive MBA course in January during the bushfire season, and everyone was home on LinkedIn, and I called a friend of mine straight away. I said, have you seen it? She's like, oh, don't bother. There'll be a lot of people going for it. And I actually kind of agreed with her on the phone, and 2 hours later I called her. I said, I've just put it in my application. She said, why? I said, I thought you were not going. I said, I just thought, you know what? I'll put it in anyway. And I got successful in it. And that was funded by the Lord Mayor charity to do an MBA course at Melbourne Business School. So those are the kind of things that I think women should always dare to, and seek knowledge and be humble about what we know and what we can and can't do, and not make it a defensive exercise where we're actually fighting our way through. We are doing it from a place of relevance, ability, intuition, knowledge, that is actually, once you put that on scale from a merit perspective, it's hard to question.
Thank you. Look, I've got a question here from Natalia to everybody. There was a question and a comment. The comment was, business language is very often the language of men. So perhaps in some cases, empowerment would mean changing this language. And then the question to everyone is, in this difficult time of pandemic, do larger traditional business approach you to help? The businesses, do they approach you to help? Would you say some kind of empathy and reciprocity emerging in the space of businesses supporting smaller enterprises? So, you know, I'm imagining what you're saying are the large corporates coming to the small organizations like yourselves, not-for-profit, and offering a helping hand?
I can sort of slightly comment on this with our reusable face masks, we've actually partnered with a few businesses to sell them at their stores, but it's actually more so been small businesses, supporting small businesses. I think we have one corporate partnership. It's the name of the business has slipped off my mind at the moment. So we were approached by one corporate business to sort of support us, but I think there's like a really nice community within the small businesses lifting each other, and yeah.
Abiola, do you have any comments about this? Have you seen anything from the asylums?
Yeah, I think it's a bit, we haven't seen much, to be honest. That's because of the, like I call it, the selfish nature that kind of came upon us with this COVID and negativity and media. Everyone was just trying to look out for themselves. So even organizations that are literally closed, everyone working from home and needing their space for us to have the mass distribution of food, said, we're sorry, you can't use it. Because they're just kind of protecting themselves. We don't know when we go back to the office. We don't know when we're going to use the space. We don't know when we're going to have access. So we haven't really had that kind of support. But in saying, for the ones that are in the chain of supplying and producing consumable goods, we've had some support in that, particularly around the things that are really hard to find during COVID, like toilet paper, for instance. We had a company drop a truckload of toilet paper for us during that intense time of no toilet paper, when they could be selling it to supermarkets. These are actually corporations that are producing Cole's version of toilet paper. So they could be using that to make more money, but they choose to take a truckload to us and to Food Bank Victoria to make sure that people that cannot get to the supermarket or cannot afford it are still having toilet papers as well. So there's some kind of those acts of kindness happening here and there, but in the scale that we expect it to be, certainly not.
Interesting. Now I've got a question here for Maria. What kinds of transferable skills that SistersWorks strives to share with the sisters? Are there any skills that have stood out more than others? You're in the business of transferring skills. That's what the business exists.
Yes, so transferable skills, I guess the main skills would be practical work experience. So within that production line, this opens up opportunities to work for businesses that make products, like sewing opportunities or things like that. Also like retail experience, we have like a retail training program for our women to work in our store and sell our products, sort of expand on their customer service skills. We also have business mentors. So we do encourage sort of an entrepreneurial pathway in our women to develop their own independent products through inspiration in our craft workshops and being in that creative environment. So we do offer some like business mentoring too from sisters that have sort of transgressed through our SistersWorks model and are at those higher levels. They have their own independent brands, so they're able to give that advice to our sisters at the lower level. It's a bit of a cycle there, but also from a really lovely community of volunteers too, people that work professionally in the business sphere. They're providing those sort of like marketing and business techniques to our women. Yeah, so I'd say they're the core transferable skills.
So I've got a question for every one of you. Maybe we'll start with Sandy first. What does woman power mean to you?
Just before I answer that, because I'll get my head around that for a minute, I just wanted to say something in response to Sue's comment earlier, which was that what you made me think about was fearlessness. And I feel like one of the things that women need to do, and maybe in part that actually answers women power, is to develop fearlessness and grit. I think we need a lot more grit. I think we're innately courageous in certain in certain areas of our life, but perhaps not as courageous as we need to be, not as fearless as we need to be, and we don't have enough grit when it comes to walking the walk that men have always walked. That there is a tendency to just to do one of two things in my experience. One is to either defer and back away, or the other is to try and take on the mantle of that male power. And every time I've seen that happen, it's been the most dismal failure. Women who do that disempower themselves terribly. They become hard and harsh, and their communication is awful. And I really do not think that women should do that. That is something that to me is the absolute opposite of women power. So perhaps that answers that question to some extent. And the second thing is just to quickly go to the business language is very often the language of men piece, Natalia. And so perhaps in some cases it means changing the language. And that's why I'm so passionate about storytelling, because storytelling, good storytelling needs to be very considerate of language. One of the things that I say to people is, as you're learning this craft of storytelling, because there is a bit of a craft, I mean, it becomes natural, but you can really you can look at it as a craft. And one of the things I say is to become quite forensic about the use of language. So for example, the words of course, which we use just trips off our tongues. But I ask people to think, what are you actually saying when you use the words of course? What you're really saying is, I know it, but clearly you don't. And it's exclusion, it excludes you. And so you have to begin to look at words from a truthful perspective. When you're using words, how are you using them to convey the truth? So if men became storytellers along with women, they too would need to think about language. And my feeling is that in thinking about language, stories are empathetic. So you think about how you're using those words. Are they excluding people? Are they pushing people out? Are they making people feel like they're idiots? Or are they including people? So I feel like stories would do that job, would change the language of men.
Thank you. Maria, what does woman power mean to you?
So yeah, when I was thinking about this question, the first thing that sort of came to mind for me was emotional vulnerability. That's what women power sort of means to me, and it's something that I touched on before with how we connect with each other, and we have a bond at SistersWorks that's definitely established through being emotionally vulnerable with each other and connecting through physical affection and just being socially affectionate with each other and sharing personal stories. And SistersWorks is filled with many strong and powerful women, and it's something that we touched on with it not necessarily being something that Sue touched on, with it not necessarily being something that's feminine, but something that makes you human. You might find it more common for women to be talking openly and deeply about emotions, and that's something that takes strength. It makes you vulnerable, but it's something that makes you human. And for me, I think that's the pocket where authentic and meaningful connections can be made, and something that women do really well.
Thank you. And now to you, Abiola. What does woman power mean to you?
Yeah, I think you kind of touched on my point, Sandy and Maria. But if I could add to that, it's really about also building a movement, building a collective voice and action that can be trusted, relied on, and used as a tool to raise each other. You know, like what Sue was sharing before in terms of being in the space, so that they can create spaces for other women. So that's what women power means for me. It's about looking after each other, building that strong bond and force that is hard to break or even ignore. You know, I'm part of the Women of Color Collective Melbourne, and we started that as a group of women working at ASRC and thinking about, you know, how do we ensure that as women of color, we amplify our own voices and we support one another. And we started this just weekend coffees and catch-ups, and before you know it, we started bringing other people into our circle, and now we've got a women's collective of over 300 women. And that's mainly because of our willingness to share, our willingness to empower each other, our willingness to support one another, our willingness to build each other's capacity, but doing it from a place of truth, authenticity, and genuineness. You know, it's not about an hierarchical, or, you know, we are talking only about women in business or women in leadership or women in different parts of society or sphere. It's about women as a whole, you know, regardless of your level of literacy, knowledge, you know, it doesn't matter. We all have something to contribute. We are all talented individuals. We are all multitaskers. We are all dealing with life that is on a human level, and we can connect on that basis. And that's one of the things I love about women power, is to be able to create that really raw, pure engagement that is Scott is emotional as well, but using that emotional, like Maria said, to our own strength, and ensuring that we are actually empowering and strengthening one another in the process.
Thank you. Some very powerful messages here. We are going to capture all this into a little blog that we're going to share. We're going to share this video as well. There's quite a few people that booked to come but couldn't make it. I think people are back to normal now with their times for work. So we used to have the events from 6 to 8. We moved it to 4 to 6. So I just wanted, look, it's not 6 o'clock yet, but first of all, I just wanted to thank all of you for sharing. Very genuine, you were very genuine what you shared, passionate, and I know that we're all going to pull through what's going on at the moment and become a much stronger society. And also, I think women have a very important role to play right now in changing and shaping how we want to see society and businesses moving forward. So thank you. Now, before we close, does anyone want to say anything else? Any other final comments? And not just the speakers, anyone else from the audience as well? No? Okay. All right. So we'll leave it. All good. Pavit, anything that we need to cover? No.
A little bit. I'm just so happy to be here and amongst such really great storytellers, all of you. Incredibly inspiring conversation, and so important. Having been raised by a really fearless woman myself, and having seen different sides of society growing up, because like my mom, so she was working full-time, and until I think I was about 6 years old, she took a pretty long 10-year sabbatical from work to raise me and my sister, and then went back to work when she felt like, you know, we were independent, standing on our own 2 feet. But she was never forced to do it. And that's the kind of upbringing I've had. Just fortunately seen a side of the world where, you know, my mom was able to do what she wanted, and people used to be afraid of her. I mean, I still am, but she had a certain relentlessness when she communicated with people, and I think she really had to, because in a place like India, the social construct is that, you know, it's a bit more patriarchal. But having been raised in a certain way, I think even her parents were ahead of their time, letting her choose her path in life. And, you know, she married late for Indian standards. I think she was like 27 or something when she was married, which is quite unheard of, because back in the day, I think people were getting married off when they were 16. So it's really like, it's great to have seen that and been so appreciative of it. And that's the kind of change that I want to see in the world. And being a male, a cis male, including, you know, really bringing out these conversations, trying to share with the rest of the world how important it is that everybody's, you know, equal. You know, we all are made up of the same kind of skin, obviously different textures and whatnot, but we're all the same. So it's something so nice to hear from all of you, and thank you so much for this conversation. I'm so inspired. I'm probably going to share this with my mom after. So
Also, we have to get your mum on the panel next time.
Definitely, she's just taking a break from teaching, so. But yeah, absolutely. One last thing to tell everybody before, I'm sorry I took a lot of your time, but one last thing is we'll be setting up a Slack group. So a Slack is, if for those who don't know about Slack, Slack is a team collaboration app, very popular these days, especially with remote working and everything. But basically, we'll send you a link. You just have to download the app, and it basically opens up to all our ethical networking conversations. And we'll have one such conversation for women power. And that way, you know, you can communicate with each other, network with each other, post this Zoom session. Normally, we would have an actual breakout session for networking and everything when we had our in-person events, which we were really hoping to do in March this year. But obviously, adapt is a great strategy. So I guess being adaptable and, you know, just making sure that we're able to still try and do as much as we can of networking and, you know, creating that platform for all of you to communicate and share your great stories and just be present, I guess.
Thank you. And we'll see you next month, I suppose.
Yep. Thank you so much. Have a great.
Thank you. Thank you.